Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add a new material into your scene, set it up as an asset, and then use the asset browser to share it between any scene file you wish. Okay, welcome back. So in the last video, we set up this startup file. So let's start looking at this principled BSDF node. So with this object selected, let's add a new material, and by default, it will be created with a principled BSDF node and a material output node. Now, as we create new materials and we get more advanced, we're going to talk about many of these different settings. But for the moment, let's just concentrate on metallic materials. So, the main thing that we do when we create a metallic material is we turn metallic all the way up to 1. Immediately, this gives us a metallic feel to our object. The next setting that we want to change is roughness. So if we take roughness all the way down, we get this incredibly smooth mirror finish. If we turn roughness all the way up, we essentially get something that doesn't really look like metal anymore. It's so rough, it's so diffuse in its reflections that we basically don't see any reflections anymore, and reflections are one of the main characteristics of metals. So generally I wouldn't ever really put my roughness on a metallic object anywhere past maybe about 0.4. You can see that around about 0.3, 0.35 we start to get a really brushed metal or a really kind of textured metal feel. So with a chrome, which is what we're going to create here, I'm going to change this material name to chrome. We wouldn't ever really have zero roughness. We would always have just a little bit of roughness. So I'm going to maybe take this up to 0.05. This is our base chrome material. Now you can see that we have our highlights, our specular highlights from our lights in our scene. Not very realistic, I know. We're using that HDRI image in the background, and our lights aren't really set up to look realistic. We don't have any kind of studio lighting setup happening here. But this is essentially our chrome material. So how are we going to use this chrome material or any other material in any of our other scenes? We are going to make this material part of an asset browser asset. So the way this works is if we go to Edit and Preferences, we'll go to File Paths and scroll all the way down to Asset Libraries. This allows us to create a path and create a library that we can then use in other scenes. So the way I'm going to do this is, first of all, I do need to set up a folder. I'm going to set up a folder, and I'm actually going to set this up on my desktop. So I have my desktop here. I'm just going to create a new folder. I'm just going to call this Asset Browser. And within that, I'm going to create a new folder called Materials. And this is going to be all the materials I make in this course. Just close down that window. So we are going to add a path. We're going to go to our desktop, Asset Browser, Materials, add Asset Library. Now, anytime we put a file in this folder, it's going to appear in our Asset Browser. Hey there, Stephen from the future here, and I just wanted to clear up something about the Asset Browser. So on my desktop here, I have a folder called Asset Browser, and within it I have a few different folders. Now, up in Preferences, under File Paths, I've set up my path to the Asset Browser / Materials folder, which is this one, and also to Asset Browser / Objects folder. So if I go into my Asset Browser now, and I go down to Materials, I'll see all the assets that are within files in that material folder that have been marked as assets. If I go to the object folder, you can see all the materials and objects and collections that are marked as assets within that folder. Now, because I have some of the same objects and some of the same materials in both folders, you can see that I get some duplicates. If I go to all, you can see that I have 2 copies of this, 2 of this, 2 of this, and 2 of this. And that's because I have 2 different folders. One, which is the cloth test object, which has all these materials. And another one, if I just back out here, the course materials folder, which also has these assets. So just bear in mind that you do need to mark your materials and your objects as assets, and your files have to be in those folders, but you can also accidentally get some duplicates. So how do we do that? First of all, we need to really save this file. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. We're going to go to that Asset Browser, Materials. And I'm just going to call this file Course Materials. So every single material I make, I'm going to create within this one file. I'll save that. Now, I'm going to make use of collections as well here. So I'm going to add a new collection. Collections are essentially just like folders within your scene where you can put different objects. I'm going to call this Metals. And we have our ecosphere here. I'm going to duplicate this first of all. So with this selected, I'm going to hit Shift D. You can see that we can duplicate that in the scene. I'm going to right click. I'm going to take that first one and I'm just going to call this Chrome. And I'm going to drag this into my Metals folder. And once that's in there, I can open up this drop down and you can see that we have our mesh, we have our material, we have our modifier and our subdivision modifier. The thing I want to change or to mark as an asset is the actual material. We don't want to mark the object or the mesh, we just want to mark the material as an asset. So I'm going to right click on that. We are going to go down to Mark as Asset and click on that, and now you can see that we have this little stack of library books next to it. That's saying that this is now an asset in our asset browser. So we can save the file. Now if I go to New and just open a new file, so I have this object in my scene. You can see that we have no material on it. You can see we have our mesh icon but nothing attached to it. We can add a material there. If we look in here, we only have material 01, which is basically a new material. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to create a new little window here. I'm going to change this over to our asset browser. We can find that there and you can see that same little stack of library books. Click on that. Now we want to make sure that we have our materials selected. That's our material library and you can see that we have that Chrome material. So let me just change this over to render mode first of all. So at the moment you can see that we have no material on that. This is our material library. Let's grab that Chrome material. We can just drag and drop it straight onto that object. So this is the exact material we made before. You can see the same roughness, 0.05, metallic at 1, everything else exactly the same. And we've just been able to drag and drop that material onto that object. So this is the process we're going to be using throughout this course. We're going to create a material, make sure it works on our object. We're going to mark it as an asset in our main material file, and then it's going to show up in this library. And by the end of this course, you're going to have a massive folder of all these amazing, realistic or really convincing procedural and image-based materials that you can use throughout all your scenes and in the final project. Okay, challenge time. So your challenge is to create a folder structure on your system, wherever you want on your system, where you can store your Blender assets. You're going to create a folder within that Blender Assets folder called Materials. This is where you're going to keep all your files that have anything to do with materials. You're going to save your material library.blend file into that folder. And you're going to make sure the file path for your asset library is set up within user preferences. Have a go at that, and you can join me in the next video.